Welcome back. What we're going to look at in our final video on sounds is the addition of footsteps. Now, in the scenes that I've shown you earlier on setting the sound for a fire or to go in and create something more complicated like um, the blueprint setup we had for thunder and lightning, we talked about the fact that you need to have an experience, an immersive experience for the player. And there's nothing more immersive, I think, when you're looking at a game like this than to have the sound of footsteps. I've got this nice grass material that I laid down on the ground here, and if I go in to play the game, the world looks nice, the lighting looks good, the sky, the clouds are moving, everything looks really nice, looks very realistic. But what happens is when I go to play it, you get nothing. Absolutely nothing. No matter what you do, there's no sound of you doing anything at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to show you two ways to fix this. In fact, what's going to get a little complicated about this is I'm going to show you two different ways to do this, but the first person and the third person are a little bit different. So I have two scenes set up, one in first person and one for the third person, which is what this is. I've got them both set up exactly the same with the same amount of files in them, so I can just jump back and forth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you first, here in third person, the easy way to do this. Then I'm going to show you the easy way to do it in the first person one, and then I'm going to come back to my third person and I'm going to show you how to create something called a physical material. And the physical material is going to allow us to create a material and give it a particular class and then associate a sound with that class for footsteps. So for instance, what I have set up down here is I've got a basic footsteps on grass setup, and it looks like this. And basically what I have here, and I can probably don't really need that palette over there. Here's my basic footstep. Now we've done the audio before, the cues before, so you recognize what these things are. I've got a left step, I have a right step. Those are completely random. I got them out of a sound file. I provided them for you out on the Google Drive or also in Canvas. And I've given you a variety of types of footsteps. There's some on metal, some on wood, some on stone, some on concrete, some on dirt, some in water, things like that. And I've given you a left and a right step out of each one of those. Now they're both mono, so it doesn't really matter. I've just designated one step to be left and one step to be right. And what I've done is I've brought them in and I've given them a random node. So it'll play them randomly, and then I've also attached a modulator to it. A lot of times you'll see game designers, when they go in and they create footsteps, they'll very painstakingly take a footstep series that you can get. That usually they come as one continuous sound. So you'll go and you'll Google footsteps, and if you're lucky enough to find the ones you look for, it's probably 30 or 40 seconds long and contains 30 or 40 footstep sounds. And you have to go into a sound editing program and cut it up into pieces and get a single footprint that you want, either left or right. Now, you might be fortunate enough to find them in stereo, in which case left or right becomes important because it's going to play through that speaker. But for the most part, we just get things that are in mono anyway. I've already pre-cut these things down so they're just a single step. But a lot of times designers will go and they'll painstakingly pull out 10 or 15 footsteps so they get this really nice randomization to the footstep. Not every step you take has the same weight, has the same cadence, it has the same anything. So we need to go in and modify that as much as possible. So what I do when I do it is I just get two footprints. And then I apply the random to it, so it'll play left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. You can't use mixer because a mixer will play them both. This is random is what you want when you want to play them in a sequence like this. Even though it says random on it, there's also a concatenator which will do the same thing, but random works for this. And then I've added a modulator in front of it. And what modulator does is I've set the pitches on these from 0.75 to 1.25. So every time that sound plays, it'll alter the pitch automatically. So the effect is, I think you can probably barely hear that. You really can't hear it very well. But every one of those footsteps sounds different. So you get the sense that you're walking left, right, left, right, left, right, but it also changes the pitch on them just enough to where no two footsteps sound alike. So I can do in 2 what some people might like to do in 12 or 16 or even 20. I've seen some as much as 20 steps. Depends on what you're trying to do. But this works really well. And I've got it already pre-set up to play. I've also, I talked about in the last video, you want to make sure that if before you do this, you want to set your sound to max concurrent play count to 1. Otherwise, you might get that weird tinny sound off of it. And if you do that, then you'll be okay. So I've got that. And I've also created a material. And what I did for the material on both of these files is that first person and third person are now set up exactly the same. So I can jump back and forth and show it to you. I don't have to kill time doing stuff. I have something called an M_demo grass. Now the way I got that was I opened up the starter content in here and I found the M_ground_grass. And then if you left click and drag it up to a folder and let go, what it'll do is it'll ask you if you want to copy it there or move it there. And what I did in the instance of this one was I copied it and then I changed its name because I don't like having 2 materials in here with identical names. Sometimes Unreal gets confused. So I changed it to M_demo grass. And then what I did was I double clicked and I opened it up. And it's a fairly big and complicated one, but all I needed to do was right over here, the base color, which is the grass right there, I had to go in and change the texture coordinates. It was set to 0.5. When I put the grass on the ground, it was like giant blades of grass. I just went back and changed the texture coordinate to 10 and 10 on the U and V, and I end up with this nice ground grass down here. It looks like that's the only thing I changed. There's a lot of other things in that material. I only changed just the texture coordinates on the grass itself. Now that I got that set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the quick and easy way to go in and add footsteps onto both the third person and then the first person. And I'll tell you why the first person is a little bit different when we get to that one. All right, now inside of your third person, you have a third person BP character, a folder, third person BP. You also have inside of that animations, blueprint, character, maps, and meshes. Now blueprints is where the third person character is located. And this is the guy that's got all the blueprint work on him that does the things that he's supposed to do. Okay, that's what that guy is. Inside the animations folder, however, is something called third person anim blueprint. And it's a little bit different. When you open it up, you'll see this looks a lot like blueprint, but at the same time, it also looks different. There are other things that are going on in here. Now, in each one of these cases, it says idle run state, jump start state, jump loop, jump end, and anim graph. Each one of these things contains all of the animations that are what make this guy do what we want him to do. And across the top up here, you'll see you have a skeleton, you have a mesh, and you have an animation. And right now, there is none applied to that. And a graph, that's kind of where I am over here on this one. This is the main graph. But you have this guy in here, and he's actually made up of all of the other files that you see in here. There's the idle run, the jump end, jump loop, jump start, third person run, and walk. And each one of these elements over here are included in this anim blueprint, and they're all located inside of here. And you can get to them through one of 2 ways, and I'm going to take the easy route here. You could, a hard way, come up here and click on animation and then pick one from a list down here. I have to pull that clear over so you can see it and then adjust that. There's all of my animation cycles down here, and if I double click on run, you'll see I've got my running guy right here, and I've also got some other stuff going on. Or what I can do is just go to the run itself and double click on it and open it up. And I'm going to get the exact same thing. In fact, I don't even need that asset browser down there because of what's going on. Now, this is where we're going to go in and we're going to actually put footsteps on him in here. This is the animation cycle. So you see at the bottom down here, it's actually 19 frames. There are 19 frames down here, 0 through 19. 19 and 0 being the same. If you know animation, you know that this is on, he's on an endless loop here. So he is set to to basically continue on. And the last frame and the first frame are exactly the same. That's what gives me this seamless run. It doesn't look like he's staggering at some point where I'm repeating a key and then coming back and moving him again. Basically, 19 is an exact duplicate of the position at keyframe 0. If you don't, believe me on that one, what you can do is you can come down here and you can grab and move him to 0, and then you can come back over here and move him to 19, and he is in exactly the same spot. That spot and that spot. And you see there's a slight shift in here, but that's because it's just a little bit of motion going on in there. That's really negligible in terms of what we're doing. All right, so I have this little button down here. I can play the animation. I can play it. I can run them in reverse. I can go back to a keyframe at a time, or I can go beginning or end just by clicking those things over there. And it's already set to loop. If I uncheck that and play him, he runs once and stops. So he is already set to be in a loop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop him there, and I'm going to use this little red bar down here to make some adjustments. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in here, and what I want to do is get really close, and I need to see exactly where we are on a keyframe when his foot comes down. So we'll start with the right foot. I'm going to scrub through this thing, and I'm going to go right there. The foot is down. So you're right about halfway between 7 and 8 at that point. Now, what happens is he's moving so fast, and I always get the question, well, technically his foot is first coming in contact with the ground right about there. It's actually disappearing into the ground back at this point. So if that's the case, why are we not putting a keyframe back at 6? Why are we moving it up to 7? And that's because the sound that the foot makes when it comes down on something is actually when it comes down full force, full flat, which is really closer to about here. Now, and the other reason we do that is, number one, visibly, we need to sync the sound with the foot being on the ground. And when he's playing in an animated sequence, you're not really going to notice the difference between those two, between 6 and 7. You're not going to see much of a difference, but you're going to, when you put the actual sound in there, the sound isn't going to actually sync up with the foot being on the ground, even though you can see this, that actually goes through the ground, and that's a problem we have with animation. Okay. Now keep in mind that this is 19 keyframes long, and to give you an idea of how long that is, an animation is at 30 frames a second. So if we're looking at roughly 19 frames, we're a little more than half a second. So visibly, we're able to sync that sound with his foot, and it's best to actually sync it when it is flat on the ground. You're talking about a 30th of a second between 6 and 7, a 30th of a second. But we really don't want to take that chance of having it sound like it's early compared to where his foot is in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and select it when it's basically, that foot is flat on the ground, and at that point it's just slightly past 7, right about there. The foot is flat on the ground. Now, I've got this thing for a reason, because I need to add a sound at that point. So the way we do that is up here we have a notifies, and you can see it's just this little capsule shape that runs along the bottom down here, or runs underneath where it says notifies. And it is a duplicate of my timeline. Okay, so I've got all the keyframes across here, or all the frames going across, or all the frames down there are all the same. And I've got a little red bar right there, just like I have a little red bar right down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a notify. A notify is what Unreal looks for when there's something that you want to do. It's like a flag. It says, hey, something's supposed to happen right here at this keyframe. And the notify that I want to have is a notify to play a sound. Now you'll notice I've got 2 of them here. And the reason is that the 2 most common things we do when we're dealing with the animation cycle is we either add a particle effect or we have a sound play. And that's why those are the 2 that are in there. There is a new notify down there, and we'll talk about that when we actually go in and create physical materials, and do the long route. But this one, I have those 2 main choices because, a lot of times I want a puff of smoke. If he's running on dirt, maybe I want a little puff of dust to come up in the air, or something like that to happen. Or if he's running through water, I want water splashes to occur, and I've created a particle effect that goes with that. Those are the 2 that we do the most. So I'm going to select play sound, and it's going to add in a little thing right here that says play sound. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub through here until I have the other foot comes down flat on the ground, right about there. And I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to right click, I'm going to add notify, and I'm going to click play sound. So now I have these two notifications in there. What do those notifications actually do? Well, let's go back and click on one and see what happens. When I click on it, I actually have some changes that I can make over here. Well, the most important change that you'll see in there is the ability to add a sound at that point. So I'll go in here and I'm going to look for a footstep. And there's my footstep grass cue. And I'm going to add that in right there. And then I'm going to go to the second one over here and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So we'll go and we'll look for footstep. And there's my grass cue. We'll add it in. And now when I play this down here, I don't know if you can actually hear that, but he's playing the sound of his footsteps as he's running. Let me see if I can't turn it. Oh, it's up pretty high. That's about, the microphone doesn't always pick that up, but you can actually hear the footsteps running in there. That's important because you need to be able to check the timing to make sure that it's doing what it needs to do. That's good. All right. So I've got sound in there. So if I save this up now, and I'll go ahead and I'm just going to pull this off to the side. I save that up. Now if I come back in and play my game, everywhere he goes, I have footsteps. All right, now that I'm listening to this and looking at it, here's a problem that I'm seeing. This is something that you're going to need to take into consideration. When I'm running this particular sequence, because I've got so much built-in modifications, I have the multiplier is changing, the modulator is changing the pitch of the footstep. When I use that cue over here, the footstep grass cue, I'm getting a little too much of that. And this is really strictly a left foot, right foot thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and I'm going to click on the right foot here. And I'm going to go back in and I'm going to look for, let's see, let's call it, what was it? I need to go back and check the name on this one so it's easier for me to find. So let me go back to my footsteps. And it's SFX Step Grass L or F. So let's go back and we'll look for SFX, and then we'll look for, in that one, this is going to be the right foot, and then I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to change that, and in this particular case, this is going to be the grass left. And I'm going to save that up, and let's go back and test it again. And that's probably a little bit better for what I'm doing on this one. Now, because when I'm doing this the simple way, which is this is fairly simple, and I am dealing with the left foot and the right foot, I have the luxury of going in and putting just those two footsteps as they exist on that, and it sounds just fine. This works just fine. Okay. Now, this really isn't the way we want to do things. And we'll talk about that here in just a second when I go back and do it the difficult way. And if you're watching this, or you may notice and see what the potential problem might be once I've got this guy in the world. He sounds really good running on grass. Okay, there's a problem right there. He's not running on grass anymore, but the footstep sounds like grass. Just so you know, that's the way this works. If I go back in and look at that again, let's go back to my animations, go back to my third person running. I'm going to pull this guy over. That's set to the step on the grass, either the right foot or the left foot. If I'm running on concrete, I need to change that so it's a different SFX. And I've got grass, I've got metal, I've got rock, I have sand, I have water, and I have wood. I've got different ones in there. But the problem with this particular system is I can only put one sound at a time on his feet. So this probably isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. You're probably going to want something more sophisticated than that. So I'm going to show you the longer way to do it. But before I do that, let me go back and show you what happens when we go into the first person mode. Because the first person is different in that I can actually see this guy. And I can tell where his foot is. When I go into first person, there is no character. So I'm going to pause here for just a second, and I'm going to open up the other game. And then I'm going to show you how we go in and do the same thing over there. So here we are. I have the first person scene all set up, and it's set up identical. I have the same grass set up down here. All right, and you can see if you step back and look at the first person, it looks like this weird hybrid creature that's part camera and part arms, not really holding a weapon there per se. We're going to talk about that in one of the extra miscellaneous ones we're going to do. And I got all these elements in here, and he shoots and does all that stuff. I got the grass down here. If I go into play, he runs around, but you can't hear any footsteps. So we need to go back and try and fix this guy and do the same thing. Now I've got the same kind of a setup. I've got my footstep cue down here. I also have my left and right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and go into my first person, and I'm going to go into my animations folder, and I've got the same basic things going on in here. I have the idle, I've got jump in, jump loop, jump start, run. I've got all of those that are in here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up run. And you're going to see it looks pretty much like that. The only thing he does, however, is he bounces up and down a little bit. So let me stop that. And you can go in and you can kind of watch him bounce, bounce, bounce. So basically, if I wanted to have him step, and you'll notice this is a 25-second animation or 25-frame animation. This one isn't 19, so the numbers really aren't going to match up that much. What I need to do is I need to kind of ascertain where his footsteps would be, and it's really hard to tell. Generally, the way I look at it is because his arms have weight, and the gun that he's probably going to be holding has weight, that when he comes down hard on his foot, the arms are going to continue moving downwards. There's a little dip right there. That's probably a result of him coming down on a foot. And then if I go and he bounces up a little bit, and then he's going to come back down right about there. And it looks like 0 is probably about where one of those would be, because the end of it and the beginning are basically the same. So we're going to have one at about 0, and I'm going to have the other one right about there at about maybe where 13 would be. So I'm going to put in 2 keyframes that do exactly the same thing. So we just set it up, so we're doing it exactly the same way. I'm going to right click up here, I'm going to say add notify, and I'm going to click on play sound. And then I'll go forward to about 13, and I will right click up here, and I will add notify and play sound. Now, what doesn't really matter which one I use in here, I know that when I'm playing the animation, it does the right foot first. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this first one over here, and we'll just go ahead and do exactly the same thing. SFX, and then I need to find grass right. There it is. And then for this one over there, we'll click on it, and we'll look for SFX, and we're going to do grass left. And if I play it, and you can kind of listen to the sound and watch his arms rocking back and forth. And you kind of get a sense that he's running. Sounds like a drum, but okay. So that works. That's working pretty good. So we'll save that up, and then let me close that out, and let's go test them out in the world. All right, that's doing kind of what I want. That's fine. Now you really can't see any foot movement, so you kind of have to look at it from that standpoint. Now, there is one other thing I wanted to show you on this one. I'll show you on this one because it works the same on the third person. And that is, what if I jump? Okay, I get a sound when I jump up in the air, but I don't get a sound when I come back down. So what I can do is I can go back over here and look at that. Let's look at jump start. All right. Now I probably don't need to put one in here because I'm actually getting, when I go in to play it, if I jump, I'm actually getting the sound of it sounds like foot, but I'm not getting it when I come down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the jump end here. And I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to kind of watch it. And I'm not really sure where he comes in contact with the ground, but again, I'm assuming that it's going to come in contact with the ground about the time that gun, if I'm moving downwards, I'm holding a weapon and I'm moving downwards and I have my arms out in front of me. When my feet hit the ground, I'm going to be stopping from the ankles and then moving upwards. So the upper part of my body, when my feet hit the ground, is still moving. So when I hit the ground with my feet, my knees are going to bend, my hips are going to probably flex forward a little bit, my arms are going to continue moving down, especially if I'm holding a 5-pound weapon out in front of me. The arms are going to continue moving down, and my head is going to bob down, and then I'm going to recover and stand back up straight. So if I scrub through this thing, what I'm looking for is the point in which the gun is continuing to move down, and then it starts to move back up. So the gun is moving down, it's kind of holding it, and then right about there, you see it starts to come back up. So right around 12 or 13, it comes back up, but it's moving down, moving down, moving down. That's probably about the apex right there. So frame 6 is about where I want to put that thing in here. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to come up, I'm going to right click. Let's go ahead and play a sound. We'll click on that sound. We'll come over here. We'll type in SFX. And it doesn't really matter at this point which of the two I use. Whether I want to use left or right, I'm just going to go ahead and pick right. That looks pretty good. So we'll save that up and I'll kill it. And then we'll go and test it out and see if it works. As long as I'm up in the air, I don't get it. So it's working pretty much the way I like it. And you can do the same thing with all of them. Now, the first person firing is different. I do have a run. I don't have a walk in here. The loop, I don't think I need to have a sound in the loop. We're all set there. So in this particular case, in the first person, it's really just the run, the jump start, and the jump in. And the jump start already seems to have one in it. Other than that, there's no other sound in here. If you're doing the third person, you have a run, you have a walk, you have a jump start, and I know that doesn't make a sound at that one, and then you have a jump in. So there's another one you have to take advantage of in there, but it works exactly the same way. You just have to go in and right click and add in a notify for play sound, and then identify the sound that you want to play at that point, and you're done. It's quick, it's easy, it works really well. Okay, unless of course you want to run on multiple materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this again, and I'm going to go back to my third person, and I'm going to have in there already set up a series of different materials. So I'm going to, rather than just have the grass one, I'm going to have some wood, I'll have concrete or stone, I'll have gravel, I'll have water, I'll have a bunch of different things all set up. And we're going to go in and I'm going to show you how to set it up. So depending upon what the player is walking on, you're going to hear different footsteps. And we're back. So I'm in my third person game and I've made a few changes to it. What I've done is I've removed all the elements that were in there that we didn't need, and I've replaced them with these 5 blocks that you see on the ground. Each one of them has a different material. And again, like I said in the first part of this video, what I did was I just made a copy of a material. Those are all existing materials that are in there. It's concrete, gravel, metal, water, wood, and grass. Copy them into my Footsteps folder or whatever folder you have where you're putting all your files. And then I renamed them, and that's all that I did. I didn't have to change anything other than in the grass because of the size of the ground plane. I did need to go in and change the texture coordinates. The rest of them are all as is, so they'll all work just fine. And I put these things down and applied a material to each of them, and left the grass on the rest of the playing field. The other thing that I've gone ahead and done is I went ahead and created the cues for each one of my sets of footsteps. So I have concrete, grass, gravel, metal, water, and wood. And they are all set up exactly the same. The way we set up the grass, I have the exact same setup. For metal, for instance, if I double click on the metal, you can see I've got my 2 footsteps. I've got random, I have modulator. And it sounds like you're walking on a metal plate. If I go in and look at the water one, it sounds like you're walking on the metal ones. And I think maybe on the modulator on this one, I'm going to turn the sound down just a little bit, because I think of all the footsteps, that one's probably a little bit loud. I'm not really going to modulate that. Maybe I'll modulate it from 0.75 to 0.85. I just need to turn the volume down so it's a little bit better with the other ones. All right, and that'll work for that. But basically, they're all the same. They're just all the duplicates of the whole thing. Now, here's the process we have to do to go in and make what's called a physical material, or a material that has physical properties assigned to it, such as footsteps. This is what we have to do. The very first thing that you always have to do when you're going to do something like this is you should have a list of all of the files that you're going to need. So, or the particular names of the materials that you're going to have. In this particular case, concrete, gravel, metal, water, wood, and grass. Those are my main category names. I can add things to it later on. You'll see you can do that later on. But for right now, those are the 6 that I have. Those are the 6 that I'm going to set up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my edit, and I'm going to go down to my project settings. And I'm going to scroll down. Since I'm dealing with physical materials, I'm looking for the physics properties in through here. And it's like right there. I'm going to select physics. And you're going to see that I've got some elemental things that are going on in here, what my default gravity is, what my default terminal velocity is. If I fall off the ground and I start going too fast, we'll do that. Frame rates and things like that. At the very bottom down here, it'll say physical surface. And it'll have surface type default is grayed out. You can't do anything to it. And then you've got 62 surfaces down underneath here that you can scroll down through, all 62 of them. They're all down there. You can have up to 62 of these materials. And what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to name them just the same way you're going to use them. So in my particular case, the first one I have is concrete. And then the second one I have is grass. And then I have gravel. And then I've got metal. Well, I didn't do that. Metal. Then I have water. And the last one I have is wood. And you can see I'm only taking up those 6 slots. And if I needed more, I can have more, and I can come back and add later on anytime I want to. If I decide I'd like to have a different type of material with a different type of footstep, I can come back and I can get that later on. So this is step number 1, going into the engine and the physics and actually entering in these categories, which are going to become categories I call upon later on. And once I've got that, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to close it. Next thing I'm going to do is I need to actually create, I've got materials here, but I need to create a new element that's going to work in conjunction with these. And that is called a physical material. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to physics, and you're going to see physical material. So physics, you might think physics has to do with, I don't know, the balance of a character or how he stands up or how he falls and things like that. But physics can also be short for things like physical. So we're going to go in, and the only thing I have in there is a physical material, and I'm going to create that, and it's going to ask me to name it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a PM for physical material underscore, and then the first one I have is concrete. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this to open it up. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm the physical properties type, the surface type here, is going to be concrete. Because these are the ones that I just created a second ago. If I hadn't created those, I wouldn't have the ability to change this. So I'm going to go ahead and select concrete. And then I'm just going to save that, and I'm going to close it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to create all of the other ones. So the next one would be PM_grass. And then I'm going to double click on that and I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that to grass. I'm going to save it up and I'm going to close that. I'm going to pause this and I'm going to make the rest of them. All right, so I have all 6 of them made. And they're all, like I did the first one, the concrete. You just basically create it, name it PM for physical materials so you can keep track of it. Double click on it, open it up, and then in the drop-down menu, just select what it's supposed to be. And those are all the ones that you created in the other setup. Now what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to take each one of these materials, and when you open them up and you select the main node, one of the first things you're going to notice over here in the details panel is at the very top it says physical material and gives you the ability from the drop down menu to add one of those physical materials you just added. So this is concrete. I'm going to select concrete. I'm going to save that up and I'm going to close it. All right, so you're going to be adding in the name of that physical material is going to go in the top of each one of your materials. Just click on the node and then go ahead and do that. And again, I'm going to pause this while I take care of the rest of them. So those are all done now. The next step that I have to do is I have to prepare the player for the blueprint work that we're going to do here in a couple of minutes. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back into the third person, excuse me. I'm going to go back into the animations. Now I'm going to go to the blueprint. And we're going to go to the third person character. We're going to go back to the viewport here. So this is the blueprint that controls the actual guy. So it's not one of the animations. This is the blueprint. If you're doing the first person, it's going to be called first person character. This is the third person character. And what you're going to do is you're going to click on the body. So the body has the outline around it. You don't want anything else in here. You want the body. Then what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down over here on the right until you get to the collision section. So I've got collision over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the bottom of that so I can see everything that's in here. What I need to do is I need to tell it to have a material system applied to it. So it knows that when it collides with something, it is supposed to be sparking some sort of a difference in materials. It's supposed to recognize what that is. So there's a section here that says return material on move. And I'm going to just check that button. If you do not check that button, then it doesn't know it's coming in contact with the ground. Even if I go back in and add my notifications into the run or the jump or whatever it happens to be, without that checkbox, it's not actually going to activate the material system. So it's kind of an obscure, like why is it on this one and why is it here? But that's where it's located and that's what you got to do. So make sure, first of all, that you check that and then recompile your character and then save him up. All right, now nothing still happens. I can still run through these things. Absolutely nothing happens. I've got wood, water, metal, gravel, and concrete, and then grass. Nothing's happening because I really haven't done the work. I'm still getting this file set up to be ready to go. So what I have to do now is I need to go in and I need to put my anim notifications, those two things that we put on the running animation. I need to go back and I need to put those notifications in, but we're going to handle those just a little bit different because all of my footstep cues are made up of now left and right. I've got them both in there randomly so it cycles through them. I'm not using an actual left and an actual right. I've actually created cues for those, so I'm going to have to handle that just a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my animations and I'm going to open up my third person run again, which is this guy. And we're going to do basically the same thing we did with that other one. I'm going to zoom in on the feet here and I'm going to stop the animation. And then it was right around 7.5 or 8. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add notify and I'm going to put in not play sound because the play sound that I did before allows me to add an individual sound to it. An individual footstep. I'm using my sound cues which contain both feet now. So I want a new notify. and it's going to ask me to name it, and I'm going to call that Footsteps. Just going to call it plain old Footsteps. And I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to add that one in. And then I'm going to scrub this to the next one, which is about there, and I'll just right click. And now when I say add notify, I have a custom one to choose from, just called Footsteps. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that up, and I'm going to close it down. You notice I'm not clicking on it and going back and applying sound. That's because there's nothing to apply. There's no way for me to apply a sound in here because I'm going to handle that through Blueprint. So it's not going to be done in here, so I don't really have that. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to open up my walk. Now we don't have a walk for the first person, but I do have a walk in here, even though it's not really set up to walk. And I'm going to do the same thing in here just because I need the practice. I'm going to show you that this is how it works. So I'm going to go in and say, okay, the right foot, right, boom, right about there. I'm going to come up, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add notify, and I'm going to use the same footsteps because I'm using the same sound for everything. And then I'll scrub this one forward, and I'll come right about there, and we'll right click, and we'll add notify, and we'll go Footsteps, and then we'll save that up, and we will close it. And then we'll go into the, not the jump start, the jump end, and I can actually see at this point where he is. So I'm going to go ahead and go right about, maybe, since he's already got 1 foot down, I think what I'll do is I'll right click and I'll put a footstep there, and then he's going to bring the other foot down right there, and I'll go ahead and put my second footstep right there. Now if you play, you're not going to hear anything, and the reason you're not going to hear anything is because I don't have anything assigned to it yet. That looks funny. It doesn't have anything assigned to it yet because this is going to be called for in Blueprint. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and see if it works. If I save that up, I believe if you're doing the jump start, you've got a little slide going on there. So I'm going to maybe come to about here, and I'm going to right click, and let's just go ahead and add in that footstep sound right about there. And there's probably really 2 of them, but you really don't need to put 2 of them in there. I'm just going to leave 1 in there as the sound of him leaving the ground, and do that. Sometimes this requires that you actually do it the other way, where I just put a regular sound cue in there and then call for it, or a sound file. But I'm going to try it with this one. We'll see if it works, and we'll just save that and let it go. Well, I'll have to test it and see how it works. Idle doesn't really have anything, and it doesn't really matter. All right, so now what we're ready to do is we're actually ready to go back and we're ready to do some Blueprint work. Now this is going to get a little bit complicated, and I can't show it to you as we go. I can't say, well, you do this and then let me show you what's doing when we get out to the scene. It has to be done in its entirety, and I'll try to explain it as we go through exactly what you're seeing and what we're doing. So first thing I need to do is I need to go not back to this blueprint. This is not the blueprint we're going to use. We're actually going to go into the anim blueprint because we're dealing with the animations. This is dealing, if you'll notice, it's dealing with my input controls, it's dealing with my movement input, and it's actually getting the movement from the anim that we're going to be working on. This is getting the motion from that, and then there's a touch input. So, and there's my jump. Those things are happening, but they're coming out of the other ones that we're going to be working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to animations and open up this anim blueprint. And I have an event graph in here. It's got this big long thing, and it's basically just firing off and going through that. And I'm going to build this system in here because this is where it has to go. So this is going to involve a couple of nodes that are particular to dealing with a character. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to type in cast to character. And I'm going to add that in to start with. This is the very first thing that we're going to start with. I'm going to have more stuff before it, but this is a good place to start because this tells you exactly what we're doing. We are taking something and we are putting it on the character. That's what cast to character means. So we're going to be saying, we're going to create something and we're going to put it to the character. So we're going to start with that. Now, I also need to have something in here called a get pawn owner. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say try get pawn, and there's a get pawn owner, and it's going to come up. And these two things go hand in hand. Basically what it says is that look for the pawn character and then cast the character. There are different elements that are in here besides the pawn. So that's kind of why this is a specific one. Try get pawn owner. And then what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to right click and I'm going to look for anim notify. And you'll see there is an anim notify footsteps. That's the one that I created. When I went back and I created that thing, I put an anim notification on the timeline and I named it footsteps. It then adds it in here for me to pick up and use as a node. So now it knows exactly which notification I'm talking about. It's the one called footsteps. So I basically have, this is the primary setup that says, look, we're going to take the footsteps that apply to the character, make sure it's the pawn owner, and then we're going to move forward from there. Now, the next ones get a little tricky because we got a couple of things coming out of it. But what we're going to have here eventually is we're going to have it look for the floor, know whether it's coming in contact with the floor, and then to recognize, once we know that we are in contact with the floor, then recognize what type of floor we're dealing with, and then what type of sound to apply to it. And that's kind of the logic we're gonna do on this one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come out of the as character node right here, and we're going to start looking to see if the player is moving and if they are standing on the floor, or if they're moving and they are on a floor, and then what they are doing on that floor. We'll make a determination as to what sound has to play. So I'm going to pull out of here and I'm going to type in, let's use get character movement. And it's down here on the bottom. Get character movement. So it says target and then it says character movement. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come out of this character movement and we're going to say, look, if the character is moving, then what we want to know is we need to start to look to see what the kind of floor is we're standing on. So we're going to say get current floor. And we're going to run those two things side by side. So basically what the character is going to do is going to say, look, if I'm moving, then I need to know what floor I'm coming in contact with. Pull those things back together just a little bit. And then I need to know specifically what I am doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a wire out of here and I'm going to type in break, find floor, and you'll see there's something called a break find floor result. And this is the one that we want. Now there are a couple of things that are in here that we are going to be using. We're going to be using hit result down here, which is in essence if you are hitting the floor, do something. And we're also going to make use of something called blocking hit. Now here's what we need to do, and this is logic, so it's always good to talk it out this way when you're doing it. There's my character. If my character is moving, then I need to know, is he in contact with the current floor? And then what this is going to do is determine, yes, I am in contact with the floor, and do something. That's going to come out of my hit result. And then my blocking hit up here would be if I am not standing on the floor. Because what I don't want is I don't want my footsteps to play a sound if the foot is up in the air. It only can play when it's actually in contact with the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to pull a branch out of this one. And if you remember back from our early days in working with blueprints, a branch is a true-false, yes or no type of statement. So in this particular case, we want to know if we are in contact with the floor. And if we are, then something is going to happen up here. And if we're not, then nothing's going to happen. We're not going to have anything attached to false in here. But this blocking floor basically is saying you are indeed standing on the floor. Your feet are not up in the air. So moving, is there a current floor? Are you in contact with the floor? And then if you are, we're going to go ahead and do something. And if we're not, then we're just going to leave it alone. And actually, if you're in contact with the floor, we're going to play a sound. And if you're not in contact with the floor, nothing's going to happen. We're not going to have a sound play. But we just need to know for sure that that's kind of where you are and where you're standing. Now, we also need to know, if we're going to be playing a sound, where the sound has to play. So what we're going to do is we're going to get something called a break hit result, and we're going to use this as a way of determining where the footstep sound is supposed to play. So I'm going to pull a wire out of here and type in break hit result. Okay, pull that up a little bit so I've got it. And you can see I've got a whole bunch of things that are going on in here. I'm only really concerned with one thing. I'm going to be using my location here in a few minutes to play the sound and to tell it where I want to play. So this is just sort of an additional, this block in through here is going to contain, there's going to be a couple of things in here that all pertain to it. But basically this is, you know, again, I don't mean to belabor this, but I want everybody to think this way, that if I am walking and I am in contact with the floor, I need to know where that floor happens to be. And what I also need to know is I also need to know whether there is a particular surface type that is associated with that type of floor. So I'm going to pull another wire out of this one and pull it down here. And I'm going to say get surface type. All right. Now, in 2D, when we're doing 2D games, we talked about arrays. And if you don't remember what an array is subdata within a particular element. So it's like a grouping. You give the player an array of weapons, and it is exactly what it sounds like. They have an array of weapons. They've got 3 or 4 or 5 or more than one, certainly, weapon. And it's a listing of those weapons, and each one of those weapons has its own set of bullets, and has its own sounds, and has its own everything. So you have all these complicated arrays. We basically have created an array already. We created a series of 6 individual sound cues, and we've given them the name of concrete, metal, not sound cues, excuse me, physical materials, and we've created them, they call them concrete, metal, wood, water, so forth and so on. We've created an array. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that array here, and we're now going to plug the array into the system so that it starts to work. So I'm going to right-click over here, and I'm just going to type in select. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a wire out of this, and I'm going to type in select. And it's going to be right here. All right. Now, when I do that, because I'm asking get surface type, it comes in with all of those surfaces attached to it. There we go. I've got them all. They're all in here. They're all ready to go. Okay. Now I'm not looking for an individual one. I'm going to be going in and applying them all here in a second. Right now, I don't have the ability to do that because it doesn't know what I want to do with them, and I kind of have to take this to the next step. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, let's do this. Let's go ahead, and we're going to come up here, and we're going to say, if I am in contact with the floor and all of this stuff is going on and it's true, we're going to go ahead and say play sound at location. So if we are in contact with the floor, we're going to play a sound. Okay. Where are we going to play it? Well, it's going to be played right where we happen to be, so I'm going to hook that into it. And then the sound, it wants to know what sound it is I want to play. Well, there's my list of sounds right there. This is my list of concrete, grass, gravel. This is the one that I want to play all those individual footsteps with, but it's right now it's only giving me this one right here. However, if I wire this up to that, what it does is it drops the sound choice out of my play at location right here and adds those choices all down here. Now, I'm not dealing with the default on that one, so I'm not going to have anything in there. But each one of these has a sound cue associated with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and I'm going to look for SFX, and the first one I'm dealing with was my concrete, and the concrete I think is the one I used was stone, or rock, excuse me. So I've got my, no I didn't, I created the cues. I thought, don't I have create, should have cues in there, they're not showing up. Let me pause this and go back and see what's going on. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to click on that, and I was typing in, looking for the wrong thing. If I just go in and type in concrete, I get footstep concrete cue. That's what I want. And for grass down here, I'll type in footstep, because that was the shortcut to that. And then I have grass. And then I go to gravel, and we'll do the same thing, footstep. Couldn't remember which word I used to lead the whole thing off. So the gravel is going to be my gravel one, and then I've got the metal. And then we've got water. And then the last one was my wood. All right. So now it knows what I'm supposed to do is if I am in contact with the ground, there's my player, so I've got my footstep notification. This is the timing aspect of it. My character is moving. He is on the floor. His feet are in contact with the floor, the hit result. That you're going to tell where the foot is coming down, and you're going to play the sound at that point. You're also looking to see whether or not that there is a specific surface type to look for. And when it does, when it sees that there is a specific surface, it's going to then load up the particular sound that it needs to have at that point, and it's going to then go ahead and play that sound at that point. Now that's all that you have to have in here. It's big, it's complicated, it involves some things we're not familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and collect all that stuff, type in C and type in footstep sounds, just so I kind of know what that's all doing. And we're all set on that one. I'm going to compile it. Hopefully you don't get a little warning up there that you did something wrong, but this is the way that it should work. My footstep animations on the owner, the character moving on the floor. He's not, foot are not up in the air. If the feet are not up in the air, which means they're in contact with the ground, you're going to play a sound. The hit result is going to determine down here what sound type we are going to play, and then go ahead and play it at the location of that foot. Save that up and close it down. All right. So at this point, we're all set. So at this point, remember what I've done is I've gone back into each one of these materials. I selected that and I made sure that the physical material listing was added into my material on each one of these. So each of them have that. I've got all of these elements in place. I couldn't even create these elements unless I had gone first into my project settings and gone down to physics and made sure that I had those names typed in down there. And I also have to make sure, and remember, don't forget to do this. You can do it at any point. You just have to do it before it's going to work. You want to make sure that you go into your blueprints, go into your third-person character, make sure that you have clicked on the actual body. You want the yellow outline around the character, and then you're going to scroll down in here until you see collision, and then you're going to open it up further and going to make sure it says that the material, if you come in contact with the material, something is going to happen when you're moving. You want to make sure that's all done. If that's the case, then theoretically at this point, if I go into play, need to make sure that's not working. So let's pause this and find out what. Okay, I'm back. I got that solved. That only took 45 minutes. What I had done is I had misspoken. When I had talked about going in and I said to you that you need to make sure that the return material on move was checked, I had mistakenly said make sure that the body is checked or selected and do that. That is not the case. You want to make sure that the capsule is selected. If the capsule is selected, you want to make sure that it says return material on move. Let's go ahead and compile that. We'll save that and we'll close it down. Now it works. Wasn't getting any sounds before, and I had to go and compare it to another file that I had where it worked, and I finally realized I had said select the body, so the body had the outline. What I really meant was just select that capsule outline, and then that will solve the problem. So now it all works. So let's go in and play. So I've got that sound, run through the water, run over the wood, on the metal. Gravel's kind of sucky. And do it that way. I would recommend that when you're doing this, obviously you're going to have more than just one material in a scene. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clone these, and I'm going to move them back. I think one of the things you're going to find is when you're doing something like this, you want to make sure that you have enough for your left and right steps to work clearly. And I think sometimes if we have too small an area, it looks like it's cutting sounds off. So this way I can go up and I can actually... And I think I don't really like the way that that sound is working, so I'm going to go back in and edit that sound. And that's, the gravel is really bad. I'm getting a clicking sound. It sounds to me like I'm getting some strangeness in my sounds. Let's go in and look at this one. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try just maybe bypassing that modulator and see if that doesn't solve that problem. And this is what you do. You end up going back and tweaking things over and over again. All right, and I think the other situation we have going on in here is the fact that I have it set to currently only play one sound, but there are two sounds in there. Let's see if that doesn't fix that. Yep, that's what's going on with that. So what it's doing is the grass is a relatively short sound. So I can play concurrently one at a time, but I'm going to go in, I'm going to set each of these to 2. It'll allow for 2 sounds. So if you've got a sound that kind of overlaps the other sound, this is only allowing for 1 at a time. So this is going to go back in and allow me to do each one of these things. We'll do 2. And we'll see if that doesn't allow me to pick up the sound. Remember that that's kind of what's happening. You are playing 2 at a time. Some sounds are very short, some sounds are very long. The splash on the water actually lasts a long time. So we'll try that again, and we'll see if that doesn't solve that. That's just a really bad sound. Yeah, that's working. Right, so that's how we do that. I apologize for that little snafu there, but at least I was, like I said, it took me about 45 minutes to find out what the problem was. And that's part of working in 3D, is trying to solve problems. So that's it for the sounds chapter or unit. The next unit we're going to have is going to be on speed tree and building some foliage.